When New York City rejected Brooklyn Dodgers owner Walter O'Malley's vision for a new stadium, Los Angeles gladly welcomed it, regardless of the lives it ultimately destroyed.
They would tell us, if you don't sell, we're gonna condemn your property. You won't get anything out of it. So that scared us. A lot of people there.
Walter O'Malley dreamed of a futuristic replacement for a cramped, aging Ebbets Field which opened in 1913. Working with architect Buckminster Fuller, O'Malley proposed a 52,000-seat domed Brooklyn Sports Center near Atlantic and Flatbush Avenues. It would be a multi-purpose arena that would have been the first of its kind in the world. The vision was bold, but O'Malley's ask from the city would be even bolder. In return for financing the construction himself, he needed the city to use eminent domain to clear the land. He also insisted on private ownership and control of the revenues. Robert Moses, New York's powerful planning czar, flatly refused. Moses wanted the Dodgers in a city-owned stadium in Queens, financed with public bonds and controlled by the municipality. To him, O'Malley's demand for a privately owned stadium dome in Brooklyn was unacceptable. The contracts between the two couldn't have been any more clear. O'Malley sought innovation and autonomy, while Moses insisted on bureaucracy and municipal control. Ultimately, New York wouldn't submit to the requests, the main issue being using eminent domain would be for the benefit of O'Malley alone. Meanwhile, in California, the city of Los Angeles sought to capitalize where New York wouldn't. Officials embraced O'Malley's vision and had a perfect plot of land for him to build his dream stadium. They could provide him the land and create the legal framework for the public-private partnership. O'Malley later decided to take the Dodgers out of the cold East Coast and head to the sunny beaches of California.
Now Los Angeles is major league in every sense of the word.
When O'Malley decided to uproot the Dodgers from Brooklyn in 1957, it was one of the boldest moves in baseball history, really sports history. The city of Los Angeles had a booming post-war population and was eager to show the country it was ready for bigger things. The prospect of a baseball team was just what it needed. But before the Dodgers could call LA home, they needed a stadium. The parcel of land they chose to build a world-class stadium, Chavez Ravine, would prove to be a challenge. Walter O'Malley presented the city with a complex deal. The Dodgers would receive 300 acres in Chavez Ravine to build a privately funded stadium. In return, LA would acquire the original Wrigley Field, the minor league ballpark in South Los Angeles. It would also receive a new public recreation area adjacent to the stadium. Baseball supporters hailed the arrangement a victory for the city. The stadium would fill downtown with jobs, tourism, and cultural prestige. Critics, however, weren't buying it. They saw something else, a giveaway of public land, a misuse of civic trust, and the complete disregard for families who called the ravine home. The controversy came to a head in October 1957 when the Los Angeles City Council voted on Ordinance number 110,204 to authorize the contract. The measure passed by a single vote. The razor-thin margin reflected the city's split identity. Supporters saw progress, while critics saw betrayal.
We were going to have first crack at moving into those projects. Now, if you could imagine 100 acres of lush, green, beautiful hills, tenement, it just doesn't make any sense. It simply doesn't wash.
Nestled in the hills just north of downtown Los Angeles, Chavez Ravine had been an established community for close-knit Mexican-American families for decades. Families cultivated gardens on the terraced slopes, children attended neighborhood schools, and parish churches anchored a rhythm of life that gave the ravine the feel of a village within a city. Oral histories of the families who lived there talk about backyard fiestas, shared meals, and strong neighborly bonds that made the community essentially self-sustaining. But in the 1950s, Los Angeles officials labeled the area blighted and targeted it for redevelopment. Using eminent domain, the Housing Authority of Los Angeles moved to clear the neighborhood for a massive public housing project known as Elysian Park Heights, designed by renowned architect Richard Neutra. Families were promised compensation for their homes and, most importantly, priority rights to return as tenants in the new apartments once construction was complete. The city painted a beautiful vision for the land they were taking through legal force: modern towers, landscape grounds, schools, and recreational facilities that would transform Chavez Ravine into a model community. None of it ever happened. The city's promise to the families unraveled almost as quickly as it was made. By 1953, Cold War politics shifted the political climate. Amid growing fears of socialist housing, public opinion turned against the project. A city referendum would later block the project's funding, and political leaders abandoned the plan before even a single unit was built. Families who had accepted compensation and moved out never saw the promised apartments. Those who resisted eviction were left in limbo, often accused by the city of failing to pay property taxes on land the city had already condemned. A thriving community was destroyed, a visionary housing project was canceled, and a hillside left vacant.
Tragedy of my life, absolutely. I was responsible for uprooting, I don't know how many hundreds of people from their own little valley and having the whole thing destroyed.
To compound the irony, the deed restrictions required that the land be used for a public purpose. What remained was a scar in the city's landscape and history. Land cleared in the name of progress, stripped of its people, and waiting for a new vision to claim it. That vision would come from Walter O'Malley and his Brooklyn Dodgers. Opposition to the Chavez Ravine deal was nothing short of immediate and fierce. Within just weeks of the narrow approval in October 1957, lawsuits began to surface. They were so immediate, O'Malley was served with legal papers literally after taking his first few steps off the plane when he arrived in Los Angeles.
A process server ran up the stairs and served him with papers.
Attorney and taxpayer advocate Julius Rubin filed a taxpayer suit contending that the contract violated the public purpose clause attached to the Chavez Ravine deed. His argument was simple. The land had been condemned for public housing, and transferring it to the Dodgers was a misuse of that deed trust. Soon after, businessman Louise Kirschbaum, represented by attorney Phil Silver, filed a second suit. Silver earned a reputation as being a gadfly litigator. He was known for challenging city actions he believed skirted constitutional limits. Silver's case focused on the fairness of the land swap itself. He questioned whether Los Angeles was receiving adequate value in exchange for the 300 acres of prime hillside property. It's important to note that shortly after the agreement between the city and the Dodgers was made, the city of Los Angeles petitioned to have the proposition, called Proposition B, placed on the next ballot, asking voters to approve the building of the new stadium. The petition and the vote would happen as the trial to determine the contract's validity was taking place. In 1958, Rubin and Silver's suits were consolidated and set for trial in Los Angeles County Superior Court. Rubin and Silver framed their arguments around constitutional authority. Both claimed that the city had exceeded its powers by essentially gifting public land to a private entity. They argued that while baseball might be a popular sport, it was not a legitimate civic purpose. The stadium might have been popular, but it doesn't equate to a public necessity under the law.
Frank, if I had objected to that question, the people would have known that I, meaning he, was a communist because I objected to that question. I said, what about me?
Both Rubin and Silver made a crucial tactical misstep. For whatever reason, they chose not to challenge the hard numbers, which were the property values of Chavez Ravine and Wrigley Field, where the city was most vulnerable. According to some, the property values in Chavez Ravine were far higher than what the city claimed. Had they pressed that point, they could have argued that Los Angeles was trading away land worth far more than what it was receiving in return, exposing the deal as financially irresponsible. Instead, they steered the case toward the abstract question of public purpose. That shift removed their strongest leverage and transformed the fight into a philosophical debate over whether recreation, culture, and civic pride could be considered public goods. By doing this, Rubin and Silver weakened their position and gave the city's attorneys room to reframe the contract. The counterargument was simple too. If the deal was taken as a whole and not broken up, the benefits package, including Wrigley Field, the recreation space, and the indirect civic gains, was beyond sufficient to prove that the public would benefit. What might have been a straightforward case about unequal exchange became a broader debate, though. And it wasn't the only blunder the opposition would make during the trial, however. Attorney Silver's courtroom tactics reached a low point when he called Mayor Norris Polson to the stand. Polson was one of the loudest and strongest champions of the stadium deal. It was Silver's hope to expose contradictions in the city's case, and he failed embarrassingly. For nearly 2 hours, Silver's questions wandered without focus, drawing repeated objections from city attorneys. Judge Arnold Prager sustained most of them. By the end, Polson answered only one single substantive question. It was a spectacle that underscored the weakness of the opposition's strategy. The pair had essentially dropped the ball in what might have been an opportunity to challenge the city's leadership, and instead became a public embarrassment. The moment reinforced the perception that Rubin and Silver lacked the precision needed to topple the deal. The trial became a high-profile civic drama. Despite damaging their own arguments, Judge Arnold Prager ultimately sided with Rubin and Silver and ruled the contract was invalid. He declared that the stadium served only the Dodgers, not public purpose, and likened it to selling land for a bowling alley or hotel. His opinion described the deal as a manifest gross abuse of discretion. At that moment, it seemed like two lawyers clearly out of their element secured a victory.
An early World Series championship team. Don't know just when we can do it, but we're going to give it an awful good try.
The ruling in June 1958 stunned city officials and stadium supporters. Newspaper editorials echoed the judge's skepticism, branding Dodger Stadium as a monument to private interests masquerading as civic pride. Residents drove past the halted project and wondered if it was destined for a wrecking ball rather than a ribbon cutting. For a moment, it seemed like skeptics had won. But the opposition's momentum faltered when Attorney Silver made a fateful choice. Instead of keeping the fight centered on the contract's fairness, like the land values, the lopsided exchange, and the city's obligations, he decided to play politics. During the trial, Proposition B, the pro-stadium referendum, had narrowly passed at the ballot box. Silver had attempted to use Prager's ruling to block certification of that vote, arguing that the judge's decision invalidated the referendum itself. In doing so, he shifted the battle from a legal contract dispute to a direct challenge against the voters. Courts are reluctant to overturn certified election results unless fraud or illegality is proven, and Silver's aggressive challenge opened a procedural door the city was quick to exploit. Seizing its missteps, city attorneys reframed the case as more than just a local contract fight. They argued it was a statewide test of municipal authority and whether cities could actually pursue ambitious civic projects backed by voter approval.
I, as one member, am thoroughly convinced that this is a good proposition for the city.
On that basis, they petitioned to bypass the Court of Appeal and take the case directly to the city's Supreme Court. Normally, cases wind their way through lower courts, but because of media spectacle, urgency, and the symbolism of what was at stake, it carried the day right there. Los Angeles gambled that the Supreme Court would be more sympathetic to the broader civic vision of Dodger Stadium than to the narrow contract dispute. Ultimately, Silver's tactical gamble had backfired. By challenging the referendum process, he gave the city the opening it needed to elevate the fight. Victory now hinged on the opinion of 7 justices, and the dream of a new stadium was suddenly alive again.
I remember walking across the center field that day with Darrell Spencer. I said, this place is really something. I hope I can do a good job today.
When the case reached California's highest court, the justices faced a fundamental question. What counts as a public purpose? City attorneys argued that the contract had to be considered as a whole, not fractured into parts. Los Angeles was not simply giving land to a baseball team, they insisted. The deal also included the city's acquisition of Wrigley Field and the creation of a public recreation area. They pointed to the indirect gains that the stadium would bring: economic growth from jobs and tourism, cultural enrichment from hosting a major league team, and expanded recreation opportunities for Angelinos. In the city's view, these broader benefits were precisely the kind of public good envisioned by the law. The opposition, however, struggled to mount a convincing counterattack. Rubin and Silver doubled down on the same abstract argument they had used in the Superior Court. They argued that such indirect gains were too speculative and that the stadium served primarily private interests. By refusing to litigate the hard numbers, like the relative property values of Chavez Ravine and Wrigley Field, they abandoned their strongest weapon. What could have been a straightforward case about unequal exchange was instead reduced to a philosophical debate over the meaning of public purposes. The position was weak, and it left the court little choice but to weigh the city's expansive framing against the opposition's narrow skepticism. On January 13, 1959, Chief Justice Phil S. Gibson delivered the unanimous 7-0 opinion in City of Los Angeles v. Superior Court. He declared that the contract must indeed be viewed as a whole, and that the direct and indirect benefits met the constitutional standard for public purpose. With that ruling, the court validated the deal and cleared the way for construction of Dodger Stadium. After a 2-year whirlwind of petitions and legal battles, construction crews returned to Chavez Ravine. Dodger Stadium opened in April of 1962. After years of legal battles, construction delays, and controversy, Los Angeles finally had a ballpark to call its own.
That day, a crowd of over 52,000 saw Kay O'Malley throw out the first ball and Johnny Padres the first pitch.
Baseball fans steamed into Chavez Ravine hours before the first pitch, navigating winding roads and parking lots designed to accommodate notorious LA traffic. The stadium lived up to O'Malley's grand vision. Its pastel seats arranged in rainbow tiers, its sweeping views of downtown, and the San Gabriel Mountains offered a backdrop unlike any other in baseball. Despite all the controversy surrounding the stadium, Baseball Commissioner Ford C. Frick presented Walter O'Malley with a ceremonial oversized key to the stadium, symbolizing the culmination of his bold gamble to move the Dodgers west. Players marveled at the pristine field. Shortstop Maury Wills called it the most gorgeous thing he's ever seen in his life, praising the firm, true infield.
We came around in September, and now I got 80-some stolen bases, so all of a sudden the media started talking about Ty Cobb's record.
Dodger Stadium did not simply give Los Angeles a place to watch baseball. It gave the city a civic heartbeat. In a city described as sprawling and fragmented, the ballpark became a rare space where Angelinos gathered across boundaries of race, class, and neighborhood. The arrival of the Dodgers transformed Dodger blue into more than a team color. Fans wore it to games, schools adopted it as uniforms, and it seeped into the city's cultural vocabulary. Loyalty to the Dodgers was passed down through generations, binding families together in a shared ritual of summer nights at Chavez Ravine. Dodger Stadium quickly transcended sports. It hosted concerts by the Beatles in 1966 and Elton John in 75, turning the ballpark into a stage for global culture. And even though many Latino families were displaced from Chavez Ravine, Latino fans became some of the Dodgers' most loyal supporters we see today. The rise of famed player Fernando Valenzuela in the 1980s deepened that bond, sparking Fernando mania and cementing the stadium as a site of cultural pride for communities across the city. Dodger Stadium became a place where Angelenos from Boyle Heights, Koreatown, the Valley, and the West Side could gather under one banner, united by baseball. In the end, Dodger Stadium became shorthand for Los Angeles itself, ambitious, diverse, and resilient. It was proof that the city could host world-class events, compete with New York, and claim its place on the national stage.
Beating the Yankees in any way at all, but sweeping them was just out of this world.
The Supreme Court's decision reshaped Los Angeles' legal and political landscape. By affirming that public and private partnerships could serve civic goals even when the private profit was involved, the ruling expanded the definition of public purpose. Recreation, culture, and civic pride were now recognized as legitimate public benefits. This expansive view contrasted sharply with New York's rejection of Walter O'Malley's stadium plans, underscoring California's entrepreneurial legal culture and its willingness to embrace innovation and civic development. The stadium itself became a living precedent. Future projects would point to Dodger Stadium as proof that indirect benefits like economic growth, cultural enrichment, and community identity could justify public investment. The ruling gave cities across California a legal framework to pursue ambitious projects that blended civic vision with private enterprise. Cities around the U.S. also took liberties using Dodger Stadium as an example for their own major projects. The Houston Astrodome, built in 1965, Camden Yards in Baltimore in 1992, Nationwide Arena in Columbus, and the Clippers Arena in the 2000s all pointed to Dodger Stadium as an example of public purpose. But for Los Angeles, the legacy was immediate and enduring. The Dodgers' arrival cemented the city's place on the national stage, transforming its identity from sprawling suburbia into a really metropolis with a cultural heartbeat. The ballpark became a gathering place where generations of Angelenos forged countless memories. But that legacy has also carried a shadow. Many Latino activists have never forgotten the betrayal done to the residents of Chavez Ravine. In 2024, lawmakers introduced the Chavez Ravine Accountability Act, a proposal to investigate reparations for the families displaced during the stadium's creation. The bill envisions financial compensation, community investment, and memorialization. It would acknowledge that the land was taken under premises that were never fulfilled. But for descendants, the debate is about more than money. It's about recognition, justice, and ensuring that the story of Chavez Ravine is not forgotten. In this way, Dodger Stadium remains both a monument to civic ambition and a reminder of the cost borne by those who stood in its path. Today, Dodger Stadium endures as more than a ballpark. It's a monument to the collision of law, land, and loyalty. The California Supreme Court's ruling did not simply rescue a contract. It redefined what counted as a public purpose, reshaping Los Angeles' legal and cultural landscape. But there will always be layers to the myth that is Dodger Stadium and a segment of its history that isn't often told by those outside of California. For Angelenos, the stadium is proof that the city could dream boldly and reclaim its place on the national stage. But for displaced families, it remains a reminder of promises broken and communities displaced and erased. That duality gives Dodger Blue its enduring power. It is both a story of resilience and a call to reckon with the costs of progress. As debates over reparations and remembrance continue, Dodger Stadium stands as a paradox, a civic landmark built on a contested ground. It is both a gathering place for civic pride and painful loss. In this light, Dodger Blue is not just a color, but a civic myth. It's an emblem of how law can build monuments, how land carries memory, and how loyalty can forge identity.